So everybody turn to Zechariah chapter 8, verse 20. We've spent an entire month in the same chapter. I'm not quite for sure why, but I've been looking online and seeing the pacing compared to Hosea, they're the same amount of chapters. This might be longer. How could it ever be longer than 19 weeks? Oh, I think we're on 13. Okay, so Zechariah chapter 8, verse 20. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, it shall come to pass that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities. Verse 21. And the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, let us go speedily to pray before the Lord and to seek the Lord of hosts. I will go also. Now, isn't that a wonderful time? He's saying there will be a future date where people in many cities will come and gather and want to say, let's go seek God. Let's go just pray and be together. And that's one thing that I've been thankful seeing Thursday nights become is our prayer time has expanded. This is something I've been praying and wanting to seek. It's just a time dedicated to prayer. I think our nation definitely needs it. It will help the church grow. And we carry each other's burdens. We really get to know what's weighing us down, making us sometimes sorrowful. We can really see how to care for one another in that. And you see here that they're saying in a future time, remember again that they've just finally got back to Jerusalem. They were in exile. Saying cities are going to be built up, and there's going to be a time when they're just seeking the Lord instead of defending themselves as they're building the temple. This saying it's a completely different state of mind of what is happening to them in Jerusalem. So it's a future event, something they're looking forward to, something that maybe we might want to seek our own lives to look like, this coming together to seek and pray to their Lord.
Josh. Yeah. Something that I think is so great about this is when I read it, I think about all the times in the past when Israel has gone to Baal so many times before, and then yet it says there's going to be a time when everyone is going to be coming to pray to God, the one true God, and it's just exciting, and that this is just such a great thing to read about when I think about all the times that they've pushed him aside and forgotten.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting thing to be how they've definitely moved away. There are times they've sought Baal and the other gods that were going on. And we see here when it was putting Lord against that all caps, so it's the sacred name of God. It's a very personal name. I always like stressing that because I never know if someone new picks up a video or not, but I think that's a personal thing that we need to pick up thinking is it's not just, he's in charge of everything. This is a sacred name, personal name. It's not calling him by his last name and talking to him about his first name kind of thing. It's a personal relationship instead of this, which he is almighty and all control. It's not like a man talking to the king and saying all this, but there's this personal connection to have that separation between how their relationships would have been with Baal or with the pagan gods that they sought. It's a different viewpoint. In Isaiah 2, verse 3, and many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mount of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he shall teach us of his ways, and we will walk And we will walk in his paths, for out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And that's an interesting thing. If you were here for the Sunday morning stuff, we were talking about qualifiers of teachers, and I was saying how there's a verse in the New Testament where it says we have one master, one school teacher, and that is Christ the Lord. And here again we have this, that God himself is the one that is teaching teaching us his ways and how to act. I just find that rather an interesting parallel between. It's completely different side note. I love how the Bible studies Thursday night, early Sunday morning into the service on Sunday will have this unusual, at least I see it, string of coincidences. The verses corroborate each other. And you know what? I didn't talk to Pastor or Vito about what's going on. I'll sit here as like, I use that verse. Be like, I had no communication with her. It's like, we didn't go together and let's go over Jonah this week. It's just like, somehow, this verse is lined up. Or something in Sunday morning, I'm like, oh, that goes on something else I'm personally studying. Oh, yeah. The man couldn't tell the difference between trees and other people because he was so blind, and how God makes us to be fruitful trees. I was like, okay, I'm writing that down as notes because that goes on this whole different side tangent I'm studying personally. I love how God speaks through his word, not only to the broad scope of the message, but also to this like, oh, that was a question I had, or that relates to this verse I read in a devotional. I love how he sprinkles these things, and it makes it this personal relationship. When it's a public gathering, God can speak to thousands of people, but at the same time, it's a personal, one-on-one relationship with you too. God is many faceted, and I love it. You get rabbit trail. See, God's working in rabbit trail, though. Humanly, I don't understand, but in the spirit, it works out. So let's go to verse 22. Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before the Lord. 23. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of a man that is a Jew, saying, we will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. We hear a lot of people talk about, I'm seekers of God. And really, they want as vague of a God that you could even imagine. They just want a squished container of Play-Doh, and that's as much as you can understand of God is. That's as much detail of God they want. They don't truly want to seek God.
That's right.
They don't. They want to fill a void in them with whatever junk that they want. They don't want to actually know who God is, because if they knew who God is, God might have some say in their life. That is what everyone is uncomfortable. People want the comfort of knowing that someone runs things behind the scenes and everything's going to work out in their favor. They don't want to see his face. They don't. They don't want him to maybe have a say in what they end up doing. Everyone wants a Savior. A lot of people aren't comfortable with the Lord.
They don't want him asking them to do anything they're not comfortable. Get them out of their comfort zone.
Absolutely. We're getting into the idea of face. You see the face of God, you know if he's pleased with you or not. A lot is shown in the face. Yeah, you might want to stop doing that. That's what I do every Tuesday. You boys go do this. Oh, then you must not be God. We don't gel, right? But in this we're seeing that out of many different nations, out of different languages, so there could be a language barrier. Who knows? But even beyond the language barrier, they say, we have more in common because we worship the same God. This must be a wonderful day. I was also hearing another person that was going over this saying, in today's society, a lot of people don't like the Jews. It's like, there's a problem with the Middle East. If they would just stop trying to make a claim of things, we'll finally have peace. That's the exact opposite of how these people are now, in this verse, in this supposed future event, where people have anti-Semitism. These people, it's like, we know that you have favor of God. God came to you people. It's like, we want to worship with you, because you should have a deeper understanding. I mean, they did have a couple thousand years jump start, if you will, on God's law, and as it is. It is said that it was to the Jew first and the Gentile. And I remember there's also other verses saying that it's like, you're supposed to be the oracles of the Word of God. Like, you're supposed to understand this stuff. So now that it came in fullness, you need a teacher? Kind of thing that goes off on a tangent. But we can see in this future event, people are seeking God and that they're blessing Israel, and Israel is a blessing to them. Isaiah 45:24. Surely shall one say, in the Lord have I righteousness and strength, even to him shall men come, and all that are enraged against them shall be ashamed. I accumulated 4 weeks of going through chapter. Chapter 8. So now we're in chapter 9, where chapter 8 was talking about future events. This is kind of going back to the current issues at the time of Zechariah. And also this might be foreshadowing how Alexander the Great's conquest over these particular nations. And again, this is another laundry list of complicated names and foreign powers. And a lot of these foreign powers align themselves with groups that were enemies of Israel. So we can see here in 9:1, the burden of the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach and Damascus shall be the rest thereof, when the eyes of man, as of all the tribes of Israel, shall be towards the Lord. And when we have this phrase, burden, it can also be translated as judgment. Yeah. God's dishing out his judgment on all these nations that have wronged Israel. And as I said, historically, Alexander the Great and his conquest kind of was used by God to wipe clean these nations. Hadrach, the first one. Hadrach, I'll just spell it H. Hadrach is actually grouped with Damascus, and Damascus is the capital of Syria. We know Syria has rised up against Israel, and that has, as we've seen, also. Sorry, I don't know why I'm having trouble. I think I'm a little dry throat. Amos 1:3. Now, I can't wait until we finally get to Amos, because I like all these quotes that we have out of it. Thus saith the Lord, for there 3 transgressions of Damascus, and even 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because ye have threshed Gilead, and have threshed instruments of iron. Again, Damascus has been known to have went up against Israel, and thus these nations being in league with each other, God is judging or his burden up against them. Let's go to verse 2 of chapter 9. And Hamath also shall border thee, Tarshish, not Tarshish, Tyre, Tyrus and Saddam, or Zadam, though it be very wise. And these people are being judged again. In God's instructions to Moses, Hamath is specified as part of the northern border of the lands that will fall to the children of Israel as an inheritance when they enter the land of Canaan. And that's, I'm not going to read it all because it's quite a bit. If you want to take note of it, it is mentioned in Numbers 34, 1 through 9. So if you want to write that as a note for later. Numbers 34, 1 through 9 kind of goes through that it was a border territory in Canaan. So now we're talking about cities that have Canaanite roots. Also, Solomon seems to have taken possession of Hamath and its territories and build store cities, and storehouses or cities to store things. This is spoken of in 1 Kings 4, 21 and 24. Taurus is actually Tyre, foreign pronunciations of Tyre, which is a part of the Philistine Empire. And Tyre was the daughter of Saddam, which is the other city. If you dig in, this is kind of dense. Sorry for boring or maybe even confusing, but a lot of these cities were named after, again, family lines. And again, those are some of the most dense and boring parts of the Bible. But you ever hit those parts in Genesis where it is, and he begot this, and he begot that, and that, and that, and that. And it's really hard to piece out. It's hard for me. I'm stumbling over all the names here. Anyway, but in those, you'll see these odd things where their children's name turns out to be a city. You can think about Cain. Cain's son was Enoch. First city mentioned in the entire Bible was he named after his son. So you have this tradition going on here. So this idea of Tyre and Sidon happen to be names that are mentioned in a lot of the genealogies, if you will. We can see this in I think Genesis 10 is a good example of a lot of it. It's also called the Table of Nations, if I remember. Genesis 10, 15. And Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, which, again, Heth could draw into other things there, but we see that it's based on the genealogies and thus the nations. Cain, the Canaanites, going on, a lot of different stuff like that. Let's go ahead and go to verses 3 and 4. And I'm just going to call it Tyre. And Tyre had built herself a stronghold and heaped up silver as dust, and fine gold as the mire of the streets. And again, that's pretty wealthy. And silver as we would have dust, just, that's a silver flake, go ahead and take it. Gold, what's the point? Behold, the Lord will cast her out, and he will smite her power in the sea, and she shall be devoured with fire. Having power in the sea could also mean a lot to do with trade influence. We've talked about that off and on. It seems to be a theme in this. It's kind of a whole other theme I'm seeing throughout the Bible, where there's a wicked city-state that's always oppressing Israel, and they seem to be very Babel. You see that with Babylon, both Mystery Babylon and Revelations Babylon, this merchant power that's devoured by fire. Okay. Let's go to verse 5 then. Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza also shall see it and be very sorrowful. And Akron, for her expectations shall be ashamed, and the king shall perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. Now this seems to be referencing a lot of Philistine connections between these particular nations. Ashkelon, Gaza, and Akron were aligned with that particular reign or group. Amos also has some stuff kind to say about this destruction. In Amos 1, 6 and 8, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will turn away the punishment thereof, because thou hast carried away captive the whole captivity to drive them out of Edom. But I will set a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour thy places thereof, and I shall cut off the inhabitants of Ashdod, and he that hideth the separate from Ashkelon, and I will turn mine hand against Akron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord God. And we're seeing these 2 prophets kind of prophesying the same destruction against these neighbors of Israel that have aligned themselves against them. And just think about how much of a peace this is for people that have been out in Babylon for 70 years to finally be able to inhabit their homeland. There's not established, there's not established farmland. They're still building their homes. They're building the temple, and they're coming back to a land where their enemies are still inhabiting around them. So they could have just said, look, they came back, they're weak. They haven't built up an army. They're just building up their temple. We can sweep in now. And God's saying, hold on. God will send destruction. You think you're afraid of these people that can wipe you out in your fresh new start, if you will. You think about when a tree is budding and it has its green stalks, how easy it is to just tear them off the tree. In these beginnings, it happens to be, we could be weak and easily overcome by things. But God says, I will secure you. These people which have acted against you, there are still judgment waiting for them. So I won't let them touch you. In fact, they'll undergo these destructions, if you will. Should have brought water. So let's go to verse 6 of chapter 9.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
My Bible, where it says Ashkelon should not be inhabited, I wrote down a synonym, that would be like it was barren, kind of with a picture, I don't know if it's correct, but with a picture like barren, if someone's not there, they can't work the land's not gonna be good for anything, there's gonna be a lot of sorrow in the land, there's gonna be a lot of shame in the land. It's gonna be looked down upon, where once it was defeating Israel, now it's gonna be the one that's looked down upon, and you know, a woman that's barren is not a good thing in the Bible. Can't produce an heir, and it's kind of, from what I understand, they're kind of not, they're put out there, you know, but I think that Ashkelon, who once, you know, was an enemy of Israel and was taking over, now is going to be kind of lost and sad, just kind of behind.
Well, yeah, the idea of barren or again not being able to have children, as you said, it seems to sound as a curse. And I believe that is for them. Look at Israel. Israel was barren and it was said desolate. They said like traders didn't even walk through that land for the 70 years that they were out in exile in Babylon. So and I'm seeing this trend when Israel is punished by God, sent out, and there's like an injustice against them by these neighboring nations. God seems to put the punishment that would have been on Israel and puts it on those that afflicted them in the first place when he calls them back. So Israel was barren, now Ashkelon going to be barren. We also say, it's kind of a side tangent, this idea of the Bible having that those that cannot have children seem to be cursed. And it seems to be that's the mindset in the ancient world. And there's some people, I don't know if it's someone that has to be online, that go through that and they feel like they're cursed, they can't have children. They feel like, why is God not giving them this blessing? There's actually a verse that I wish I remember to write down that says that if you're a eunuch, to not say that, oh, I am a withered tree, because God will give you a name greater than sons and daughters. I believe it says, and I'll make you a pillar in my temple. Now, that was funny. I was telling earlier was a video was talking about a guy saying, I'm so blind that I can't, it'll make sense later. I'm so blind that I can't distinguish trees from people. You know the pillars in the temple were supposed to look like cedars in Lebanon? Again, trees are fruitful, right? So God says, I'll make you fruitful in godly things if you're not going to be fruitful in children. And that's an encouraging thing. I sit here and I think me and my wife are separated. We're unhappy. That means I'm technically not being able to have kids. And I'm sitting here, it's like, God, you've promised me other kids that ain't later. I've seen visions of this. So I'm like, I got to lean on you saying, you're going to make me fruitful when I see here where I look cursed. Again, there could be someone online that needs to hear that. I don't know if that applies to us, but we sit here and we think, how are we being fruitful? This is something I'm always looking at Bible studies and stuff like that. Like, am I actually making an impact? I'm not saying like, oh, I can write down how many people that came to the Lord. It's like, do I actually see where there's fruit in where I'm putting stuff, my effort in? Because if I do what I didn't, I would say I'll redirect myself, because I want to be fruitful for God. Again, this is going on something else I'm studying, but I mean, fruitful for God is really important. You can think about John the Baptist. I don't know why I've been leaning on John the Baptist recently, but when he talks to the Pharisees, he says, if you're not a fruitful tree, that the axe is going to be to your roots. There is a part in Deuteronomy where they're talking about sieging cities, and they say, don't cut down the fruit trees. Are they men for you to? I don't know. I've been researching a different tangent. Are they men for you to chop down? We're supposed to be fruitful. Just, I would like to see some results, but God gives an increase, and that's not me to know. Sorry. I jumped around like 5 different things.
And being fruitful is sometimes it's hard when you don't see it. I know that from teaching the kids, sometimes I teach and I feel like they got nothing out of that lesson or that day, and then, you know, one of the parents or someone will call me up and say, hey, you know, they've been talking about the lesson, they've been singing these songs, they learned that in your class? I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, I don't see it sometimes, but I know that God's working with that fruit, that the seed that's planted, God's working it, and He'll grow it in His time. And that's what I have to take encouragement from, because sometimes it is hard if you don't see the fruit that's coming through, and you're like, is it really worth it? Am I getting through to people? But I just remember it's God's time that He's, you know, He does take care of it in His time. It's just not always my time.
No, believe me, that's exactly what I'm saying. And I relate with you. I've been in your shoes where I sit there and like, I don't know if those kids got that. But I'll tell you, lyrics definitely picking up a lot like you have to say. So I'm very thankful for your ministry there. Yeah, fruitfulness is kind of an important thing that we can look at, see in our lives and what may need to be pruned. Time to get back on track. Number 6. And again, those are the words that kind of fell out in modern English. And a bastard, again, a child without a father. Again, we're not from the same line. Shall dwell in Ashta, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. What does that may look like? The Philistines happen to be a worshiper of who? Here on Bible Jeopardy. What I got happens to be his dad. Dagon. And a lot of stuff, Dagon happens to be Baal's father. Dagon. So, getting the pride of Dagon, it says he will cast it out, or cast the pride of the Philistines off. In Dagon, we see something like this happening in 1 Samuel 5:1-7. I'll read this because I really like this. I like it when you see this, like the wars of the gods going, and you see how God kicks some butt. Really does. So, and the Philistines took the ark of God. So one of these times where Israel's acting up, and God's like, time out, kids, that means the ark got to go. This was like, it went out for battles, right? So it was like, it was a, how do I put it, modern day. It was like their tank. It was a military instrument that they occasionally used. It was like the only nuclear bomb at the time. And God says, nah, can't rely on it now. You're in timeout. I know that might be a little bit of taking it a little flippantly, calling the ark a nuclear bomb, but I'm trying to put it in a way you may understand. It might be taking that out of its sacred context. But. Okay. And brought it from Ezberah, some fancy name, sorry, unto Ashta. Why we're talking about Ashta. When the Philistines took the ark of the Lord, they brought it into the house of Dagon and sat it by Dagon. You ever had two people at school sit next to each other and you know they probably don't get along? Fights may happen. Okay, there in 6. And when they of Ashta arose early in the morrow, and behold, Dagon was fallen upon his face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. What do we call that? It's a fancy word called prostrate. Dagon had to get on his hands and knees before the one true God. God's above those other little g gods that he may be a part of. The nations were under rule is what I mean, as in part of. And they took Dagon and set him in his place again. It's like, oh, must have been an earthquake. Our poor statue of a god, we'll put you back. Coincidences. And when they arose early on the morrow morning, behold, Dagon has fell upon his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. And his head of Dagon and both his palms of his hands were cut off upon the threshold. Only the stump of Dagon was left to him. So God squished the bug, I'll say. It's like, no, don't get it. Okay. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any that came into the house of Dagon tread upon the threshold of Dagon in Ashtalah unto this day. So they were like, hold back. This is Yahweh's territory. He's put it into your idol. He says, we can't stand here and worship our God here because another God has taken it. There's some days where I wish God would be taking it. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Would show this kind of, hold on, you can't act like that. Think about it. They put the Ark of the Covenant like it was another God that's sitting next to it. Like they, fancy word, antologically the same. They were similar. Like they were building up their pantheon. Here's Zeus, and here's the Ark of the Covenant. They can chill. No. I was like, no, you won't put us in the same place. We won't share the same time. Think about it. God is jealous for his people. It's like, you won't even compare me to this statue. It's crazy. And so the priests, funny thing is the priests understood that. They understood this messaging and said, yeah, we're not going to worship there. But the hand of the Lord was heavy upon Ashtalah, and he destroyed them and smote them with emerods, or emerods, even Ashtalah and the coast thereof. And when the men of Ashtalah saw that it was so, they said, the ark of the Lord of Israel shall not abide with us. Becomes hot potato. For his hand is sore upon us and upon Dagon our God. Oh man. It's like, we got to find someone else to take this. We're going to take it to the next white elephant party. Like, we got to get it out of our hands here. Because he doesn't like our God. Think about it. And they stay worshiping this God even they know that just like, he can't stand this. We got to get this thing out here. There's no conversion there. Get it? Pretty big wake-up call. I guess we'll go to verse 7 of Zechariah chapter 9. And I will take away his blood out of his mouth and his abomination from between his teeth. But he that remaineth, even he, shall be for our God, and he shall be as a governor in Judah, and Akron as a Jebusite. Probably, now that I think about it, and I'll study that out for you. There's so much time in the week. Okay. Zechariah 25. 15 through 17. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, the Philistines have dealt by ravage, and have taken vengeance with a despiteful heart, to destroy it from all heathen. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will stretch out mine hand upon the Philistines, and I will cut off the Chazrathemes, and destroy the remnant of the sea coasts, and I will execute great judgment upon them with furious rebukes, and they shall know that I am the Lord when I shall lay my vengeance upon them. And this is the destruction of the Philistines. Right, yeah. And I think that's where I'm probably going to leave off, and I'll study some words that I need to break down their meanings. For next week, we'll go back to